Hello everybody, how are you doing? I hope all of you are doing well and stay in a good health and good condition. Although during this pandemic time, it's not easy to face, not easy to overcome, but hopefully everybody is doing good. Okay, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude. Thank you very much to Dr. Waleed, Ziad, who invited me to give a presentation on Islam in Indonesia in this course, the course of Modern Muslim Civilization. And my part here is to give a general talk introducing of Islamic civilization or Islam in Indonesia in general. And my presentation today will be entitled Islam and Muslim Society in Indonesia. I will talk about the dynamic of Islamic intellectual, socio-cultural, and political history. Anybody can answer the question of where Indonesia is in this world map? Yes, you're right. The red shaded area, that's what we know right now as Indonesia. But 2 centuries ago, that area is not called Indonesia yet. But some people call Nusantara. Some people identify this area as Lesser India, because the big India is compared to big India in this area, and this is Lesser India, or some local people will prefer to call it Nusantara. Yeah, today I'll be talking about how is Indonesia before Islam, before called Indonesia, and then I'll be covering as well how Islam arrived at Indonesia, who was responsible for introducing Islam to Indonesia, why it is introduced to Indonesian archipelago, etc., etc., and what is the impact of introduction of Islam to Indonesia in terms of its scholarship, its culture, how Islam shapes Indonesian culture. And then in the last part of the presentation, I will be talking about how Islamic values, Islamic actors and agents are shaping modern Indonesian state. All right, before Indonesia, before Islam, some people call Nusantara, this archipelago was controlled at first by the kingdom called Sriwijaya Kingdom. This is Hindus kingdom based on southern Sumatra. This is Sumatra Island, and Sriwijaya Kingdom in the 7th to 13th century is a big kingdom that controlled majority of Southeast Asian countries right now. So the Sriwijaya. Another influential kingdom as well is Mataram Buddhist kingdom here in Central Java. This is Java Island, and in Central Java is controlled by Mataram Hindu, and then turned into Buddhist kingdom in 8th to 11th century. And one of the legacy of Mataram kingdom at the time was building the largest Buddhist kingdom in Central Java called Borobudur Kingdom. It is considered of one of 7 wonders. One of the 7 world wonders is called Borobudur. And another also influential kingdom is called Majapahit Kingdom that ruled in eastern Java, and its area of control is also spreading across Southeast Asian regions. So basically Majapahit also Hindus, and then turn into Buddhist kingdom. And then after the control of these Hindus and Buddhist kingdom, there is also colonial countries that came to Indonesia, ranging from Portuguese coming to Selat Malacca here to Strait Malacca, and then French, British, and Dutch is also coming to these islands of Indonesia. Next, why this also probably a big question? Why people from around the world, especially from the Europe and Arabs and India, are interested to come to these Indonesian islands? Some scholars mention that the currency of the time, the very important good at the time, is spices that is produced in India, and mostly and more importantly also in this called Spice Islands, which is in Moluccas. Let's see, where is it? Okay, let me point. This Moluccas Island, Spice Island. It produces a lot of spices that people from Europe come to India, to Indonesia, at first for the purpose of trading, obtaining some spices from Moluccas Island and then transport it into Europe. So the Middle Eastern or the Arab traders, the Indian traders, they are trying to find sources of spices, which is one of them is in Moluccas, in Maluku Island here. Why spice is very important at the time? Because one of the reasons is that spice can preserve meat, for example, during winter in Europe. So it is very expensive and very expensive and precious good that European are very interested in having spices. And through this trade relationship, initially, Islam or Muslims come to Indonesia as well. So the Muslim traders from Arab, from Persia, from India, they are coming to Sumatra or to Java or to Maluku to do trading. So mainly it's trade relationship. So the introduction of Islam to Indonesia actually is through three stages or three phases. First, trade encounters between 8th to 12th century. Yes, there are some documents or there are some cultural material evidence that there are some Muslims who came to Indonesia during the time. But Islam is a religion that has been adopted by local people is not that apparent during the time. But the most spreading Islam, the most spreading the religion of Islam in Indonesia is come into being or started in 12th to 15th century, especially after the fall of Baghdad, because Baghdad is the center of Caliphate, Abbasid Caliphate. There's the Caliphate, the big Caliphate in medieval era. When Mongol come to Baghdad and destroyed everything there in Baghdad, attacked Baghdad until the Caliphate of Abbasiyah is falling and cannot survive anymore. Muslim scholars, especially the Sufi activists, Sufi orders, Sufi missionaries, they are spreading across the globe, across Muslim and non-Muslim world, not only to do trading but also to spread Islam. So the spread of Sufi orders after the fall of Baghdad is coming to Indonesia as well. So during this time, there are so many local histories that has been written by those Muslim scholars that have a mystical orientation. We will talk about that later. And then the third phase of the development is that religious and political relation. Yes, they are spreading Islam, they are spreading the religion of Islam, and then also politically, Islam is adopted by local rulers, from which they establish what so-called Sultanate, Islamic Kingdom, in Indonesia. For example, in the 17th century, the Ternate Sultanate is established. Yes, there are some influence from Middle East from the Arab Muslims propagators in Ternate. The same thing in Pasai. Pasai is northern Sumatra. Samudra Pasai Kingdom is also established there. And Demak Pajang in Java is the first Islamic kingdom that has been established in Java. And Mataram Kingdom also later on, from Hindu to Buddhist and then turned into Islam. Mataram is still available, still around until right now. And Bone and Goa Kingdom in Sulawesi. These are major Islamic kingdoms or sultanates that emerge and has been established in Indonesian islands. Not only that, the coming of Islam to Indonesia not only inspired local rulers to establish Muslim sultanates or Islamic sultanates, but it can also be used as a means of resistance against colonial countries. For example, when the first time the colonial country come to Indonesia, come to this region, is that Portuguese, after they find a technology to sail across the sea against the right direction of the winds, they arrive at Malacca Strait here, Malacca Strait, and control the trade from of spices from the Spice Island, Java, and then through Strait of Malacca to India, Arab, and Europe. Portuguese are controlling this strait, this very strategic strait here. But then local Muslims, sultanates, try to attack Portuguese. First at 1511, when Demak Sultanate, under the command of Pati Unus, tried to expel Portuguese from Strait of Malacca, but it fails. And the second attempt also tried to attack Malacca together with other sultanates in Malaysia, but it's again Portuguese are too strong and their war equipments are more complex and sophisticated, more advanced, so the Demak attempts has been failed. But in the last half of the 16th century, the Portuguese who ruled in Ternate here is defeated by the local sultanate. So the spice commodities is not controlled by Portuguese anymore. So that is an example of how Islam is used to fight against the colonial ruler. And the same thing when Portuguese is not around in Indonesian islands, then replaced by the Dutch. There are so many wars that has been launched by local Muslim rulers. For example, in Aceh in the 19th to 12th century, 19th to 20th century, Padri War, for example, in Western Sumatra, and Java War in 19th century, Kowa War in Sulawesi Island in 16th century. So these are local Muslim sultanates that fight against the Dutch rule at the time. Now we talk about the rise of Islamic scholarship and culture. I've been told that you have studied about Sufism and Islamic scholarship in Persianate world, for example, and it also developed in Indonesia, especially of the first introduction of Islamic scholarship, especially the mystical orientation of scholarship is occurring in Samudra Pasai, and one of the scholars that's responsible for introducing Islamic mysticism in that area is Hamzah Fansuri. This is the Hamzah Fansuri. He introduced like intoxicated Sufism, Ibnu Arabi like Sufism. So the union with God is very important. That whatever we see around us basically is the manifestation of God. That kind of Sufism. That see everything in this worldly phenomena as the manifestation of God Himself. And then after Hamzah Fansuri and his students like Shamsuddin As-Sumatrani developed these ideas of Islamic Sufism, Islamic mysticism in Aceh, in northern Sumatra, and people are attracted with that idea. Then come Indian or Gujarati based scholar who come to Indonesia or to Sumatra at the time by the name of Nuruddin Ar-Raniri. He also studied Sufism in India, in Gujarat. He's studying also fiqh, Sufism and Kalam or theology in India. But it is kind of more sober Sufism, what's so called as sober Sufism. Yes, the purification of heart is important, but do not forget the legal aspect of religion. So when he came to Indonesia, when he came to Sumatra, and knowing the spread of Ibnu Arabi style of Sufism, he is opposing that. For him, that is heretic form of Islam, an orthodox form of Islam, an accepted form of Islam, because this kind of Islam, or the Islamic mystic of Islam, is tending to belittling the legal aspect of Islam, of the fiqh. So Nuruddin Ar-Raniri is opposing the ideas of Hamzah Fansuri and his students, so introducing more legal aspect of Islam. And he was at that time also recruited by the local sultanate as the main advisor, the main religious advisor of the sultanate. But in the end of his life, he decided to go back to Gujarat, to India, and then now the local scholar by the name of Abdul Rauf As-Sinkili, who studied in Medina, in Mecca and Medina, when he came back to Indonesia, when he came back to Sumatra, he knows what's going around. He knows the idea or the thought of Hamzah Fansuri was heavily influenced by Ibn Arabi. He also is familiar, I don't know whether he met Nuruddin Ar-Raniri or not, but at least he is familiar with the idea of Nuruddin Ar-Raniri, who was emphasizing more the legal aspect of Islam. Abdul Rauf As-Sinkili tried to reconcile the mystical aspect of Islam and the legal aspect of Islam. Just like probably you have studied earlier, like Al-Ghazali. who tried to combine or to reconcile the tension between Ahlul Hadith or Ahlul Hadith, the textual, scriptural, and legal aspect of Islam, and Ahlul Ra'i, or the more rational, more mystical, more spiritual aspect of Islam. So Abdurrahman simply play that kind of role in Indonesia. But there's also another scholar by the name of Yusuf al-Maqassari. He is coming from Sulawesi, as you remember, from this area, from Goa area, and then he wanted to broaden his mind, his network, and his scholarship by going to Middle East to study. But before going to Middle East, he traveled to western part of Java called Banten. When he arrived there, and he was recruited as also the main advisor of Sultan in Demak. No, not in Demak, in Banten. But because his main purpose is to study abroad, to study in Al-Haramain, in Makkah and Madinah, he traveled to Makkah and Madinah. After spend times in Mecca and Medina, having a good knowledge of Islam there, he came back to Banten, to West Java, and he continued to serve as the main advisor of Sultan Ageng Tirtayasa, which is the Sultan of Banten, and wanted to reside in the west part of Java, in Banten. But at the time, there is a big tension between the Sultan of Banten with Dutch colonial rule. So when the war broke between the Banten Sultanate and the Dutch forces, he was forced to exile to South Africa. But he is probably not only the religious scholars, but at the same time he also introduced some kind of the activist Muslim scholars, because he used a religious justification and religious spirit to fight against the Dutch during that time. And yeah, that's Yusuf al-Maqassari. Another kind of scholarship that has been spreading in Indonesia at the time is what I call a syncretic Islam. One of the main figure that introduced this kind of syncretic Islam is Ronggo Warsito. He is a Javanese scholar. Java, the island of Java, which has been ruled by the Hindus and then Buddhist kingdom, is very familiar with mystical ideas, with spiritual aspect of religion, because it is based on Hindu and Buddhist religion. And Ronggo Warsito, when he was well versed with Islamic teachings, at the same time, he is also well versed with Hindus and Buddhist concepts. Try to introduce Islamic ideas through Hinduistic and Buddhist stories. So basically, there is a syncretic element in his Islamic thought. For example, yes, he is heavily influenced by, for example, Ibn Arabi's mysticism, but at the same time, he is also inserting some Hindu elements into his thought. Another kind of scholarship that have been developed in Indonesia is kind of scientific Islam. Maybe this term is debatable, but what I'm trying to say here is that Karang Patingalawang, who lived in southern Sulawesi, southern Celebes, He met when he met with Christian missionaries who came with Dutch forces, which Dutch traders. He is encountered with scientific tradition, especially how to calculate calendars, how to draw a globe map, how to see or to what you call it, to see or to observe the stars in the sky. So he is very curious, is very intrigued to study the science. And yes, he is Muslims and at the same time develop scientific form of Islam in southern Sulawesi. But the most influential figures probably, especially in Java, is what so-called 9 saints who introduced cultural Islam. Spread Islam in Indonesia, especially in Java, through trade, education, arts, and politics. So this is one of an example of how these 9 saints, or in Indonesia we call it Wali Songo. Wali means saints, Songo means 9, so 9 saints introducing Islam through these musical instruments. These musical instruments had been used by local people to tell Hindu stories, Buddhist stories about, for example, about Bhagavad Gita, about the story of Ramayana. But after the coming of Islam, through these 9 walis, 9 saints, they're introducing Islamic stories, Islamic teaching through these local music instruments and arts. So yeah, they are responsible for spreading Islam to Indonesia through this kind of way. After that cultural and religious heritage, Islamic heritage in Indonesia, in the 20th century, the political tendency of Islamic movement form what's so-called as SDI, or Islamic Trade Union, in 1908. The main purpose of that time is because the trade in Indonesia was controlled by Chinese or by foreign traders, and the local traders are not powerful enough to compete with them. So this Islamic Trade Union formed this social political organization to fight or to compete with the foreign traders and union. So they form SDI, Islamic Trade Union, SII, Islamic Union of Indonesia, in the early 20th century. But the cultural and the mystical form of Islam that has been spreading across Indonesia, especially in Java, through madrasas, through what you call pesantrens, they form an organization called Nahdlatul Ulama. So when we know about the 9 saints, the 9 wali who spread Islam in Java, and the mystical aspect of Islam from Hamzah Fansuri, Abdul Rauf Hasinkili, Yusuf Al-Maqassari, that kind of Islam is transformed into this kind of cultural and traditional Islam in the forms of NU, or Nahdlatul Ulama. So they educate the local people with Islam in educational institutions called madrasah, or called pesantren. They are teaching the book of Al-Ghazali, of Imam Ash-Shafi'i, or Muhammad Idris Ash-Shafi'i, and the madhahib, or the Islamic schools in Islam, through this kind of means, which is pesantren. And the more reformist form of Islam, the modernist the modernist form of Islam that put more emphasis on Islamic, not only Islamic law but Islamic reformation, like going back to the Quran and the Sunnah, belittling or put less emphasis on Islamic legal thoughts, Islamic mysticism, Islamic cultural heritage. They're not really interested in that, but they are trying to present Islam in different way. They are using the reformist ideas of Islam, which is Islam is basically founded based on Quran and Hadith, and at the same time they also adopted some modern tools, instruments, institutions to spread the idea of Islam. For example, instead of madrasas, instead of pesantren of NU, Muhammadiyah formed modern schools, just adopting the Dutch schools, but putting some Islamic curriculum in the school. In terms of hospital, they built hospitals as well to care of the sick. And Islamic philanthropies through, for example, they do fundraising to collect money, to collect fund, for example, to do social work. That's Muhammadiyah. And the other form of Islam in this in the second half of 20th century, there is one big Islamic political party called Masyumi, and it used to win one election during the time before the withdrawal of NU from Masyumi. So this Masyumi is one form of political Islam. So yeah, the cultural Islam, the more traditional Islam, the more mystical Islam, they transform into one Islamic mass organization called Nahdlatul Ulama. The more reformist Islam, like inherited, for example, from Padri movement or from Nuruddin Ar-Ranari thought, then becoming Muhammadiyah. And some political element, some political aspect of Islam is coming into being in organization like SDI or SDI, SII, and Masyumi, and NU later on also become political party as well. These Muslim scholars, these Muslim political activists, when Indonesia get its independence in 1945, then try to find a philosophical foundation of Indonesia. At first, they proposed a charter. They proposed a philosophical foundation called Jakarta Charter. One of the first philosophical foundation is that the Republic of Indonesia is founded on principles of the belief in one God, with the obligation for adherents of Islam to practice Islamic law, Islamic Sharia. Ketuhanan dengan kewajiban menjalankan syariat bagi Islam dan bagi pemeluk-pemeluknya. But then, this kind of sentence, this kind of phrase is opposed by some part of Indonesian people in Eastern Indonesia, which probably are non-Muslims or Christian-based Christian-based population in Eastern Indonesia. When they oppose this kind of phrasing, then the Committee of Independence agreed to revise it and become believe only in one God as one of the 5 principles of Indonesian state at the time. So Indonesian state is based on what's so-called Pancasila, 5 principles, and one of them is belief in one God. How is the relationship between religion and faith in Indonesian constitution? The relationship between religion and the state. Basically, yes, Indonesia uphold the idea that everybody should believe in one God, in one high deity, and but everybody are free to practice their own religions and faith. But the atheistic faith is not acceptable. It should be believing in one God. In general, Indonesia is not Islamic state, yes, but it's modern state with a majority Muslim population. From total population around 207 million, where Islamic values, institutions, symbols are prevalently apparent everywhere. So, now about Muslim typologies. Some people, some scholars see that Indonesia's Muslim populations can be categorized into 3 types. First, Abangan, which is more animistic aspect of syncretism. So yes, they are Muslims, but they believe in, for example, in the power of certain animals, certain can be animal, can be a tree, for example. They believe in the power of certain whatever's considered as divine. And Santri, yes, they have a certain level of syncretism, but their Islamic aspect is more powerful, is more influential in his or her practice. And Priyai, the Hindu's aspect, yes, he is Muslims, for example, but he's still influenced by Hindus ideas. And Priyai mainly they work as bureaucrats. But that's the category of Muslims in the 60s. In the 70s and 80s, some anthropologists try to revise that categories, but mainly the debate is around that category or that types. And nowadays, we might hear when we study about Islam in Indonesia, what's so-called Islam Nusantara, Islam berkemajuan. Basically, this the more advanced development of NU ideas, Nahdlatul Ulama, as we may remember from the beginning. They are more cultural, more traditional, they are more adaptive to mystical ideas of Islam. That's Islam Nusantara. Whereas Islam berkemajuan is generally associated with Muhammadiyah. It's more reformist in thought, persis as well. Persatuan Islam is kind of a modernist, reformist Islamic movement in Indonesia. Progressive because they are more willing to adopt Western ideas, Western institutions, Western means to promote or to develop Islam. The very modern, with the very current development of Islam in Indonesia is, I call it Islam ideologies or ideologist Islam. These movements are probably not a majority of Islam, but their voice are very loud, very conservative. Politically, they are promoting Khilafah, the re-establishment of Khilafah. Khilafah means Islamic states that rule all Muslim population, not only in Indonesia, but internationally. This kind of idea is promoted, for example, by Hizbut Tahrir or the Hizbut Tahrir is the political party called the Freedom or the Free Party, yeah. And the more local ideologies movement is FPI, or Islamic Defense Front of Islamic Defense. They are promoting NKRI bersyariah, Indonesia based on Sharia. This is FPI. So this probably the more general discourses of Islam in Indonesia that we encountered today. So yeah, that's is in general about Islam in Indonesia. This is fun facts, or the Kapata Selecta of Indonesian Islam. Indonesia is the most populous Muslim countries, around 207 million people, around 87% of total populations. This one we can talk about later in the next session, hopefully about more general about Islam in Indonesia. That's is our presentation, or my presentation. Hopefully it's beneficial to all of you. You can take some lessons from it. Hopefully we can see you, I can see you next time, somewhere, sometime. If you have any questions, if you have any more to talk about Islam in Indonesia or Islam in general, please feel free to contact me through Dr. Waleed or through Kevin Fogg next time, inshallah. Thank you very much. See you, and I hope everybody always in a good health during this difficult time. See you. Thank you very much.